From living off food stamps to eating a $10,000 steak, these are the richest fighters in the world. And first is Jose Aldo. From growing up in the most dangerous slums in the world to a 9-bedroom house in Orlando, Jose Aldo has managed to make over $9 million from his fighting career. Aldo's words of wisdom: never stop believing you can fulfill your dreams. I don't know about you, but I wish my dreams led me to $9 million. One of the most explosive fighters I've ever seen is Junior Dos Santos. Dos Santos is a Brazilian mixed martial artist and a former UFC heavyweight champion who always managed to give UFC fans a great show every time he stepped into the octagon. His net worth stands at $10 million. His words of wisdom: when you believe in something and you are a good person, good things happen. John Bones Jones definitely believed in himself. An American mixed martial artist and 3-time light heavyweight champion of the UFC, he was reinstated to the UFC in 2015 after, you won't believe this, being stripped and removed from the rankings for hit-and-run felonies. He won back his light heavyweight title in 2017, but tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, causing even more controversy. Jones' net worth? $10 million. Bones once said, "The only limitations are the ones we put on ourselves, and I just don't believe in limiting myself." Speaking of bloated bank accounts, check out Chael Sonnen. He signed with Bellator MMA and competes in the light heavyweight division. Sonnen previously competed in the UFC, WEC, and Pancrase. Sonnen's net worth? $10 million. Sheesh. He's quoted as saying, "They'll tell you failure is not an option." That is ridiculous. Failure is always an option. Failure is the most readily available option at all times. But it's a choice. You can choose to fail or you can choose to succeed. Someone else who clearly didn't fail, Frank Mir, a former UFC heavyweight champion who holds the record for the most fights, victories, and submissions in UFC heavyweight history. So what is Mir's net worth? As of January 2023, his net worth is $11 million. It almost makes getting punched in the head every day worth it. Almost. Mir once said, "You know what the true definition of hell is? It's when you die, you get to meet the person you could have been." That's deep. Speaking of deep, our next fighter must have deep pockets to carry around all her cash. Former UFC bad girl Ronda Rousey is an American mixed martial artist, judoka, and actress. She's the only female MMA fighter on our list. Rousey's net worth? $12 million. The former UFC women's bantamweight champion won 12 consecutive MMA fights in a row. She's quoted as saying, "Everyone is so offended by the mindset it takes to become the best in the world." This next fighter certainly knows what it takes to become the best in the world. Quinton "Rampage" Jackson, an American mixed martial artist, actor, retired professional wrestler, and former UFC light heavyweight champion. Gotta love this guy. Jackson's net worth? $12 million. Jackson famously said, "If you're going to let pressure stop you from living your dreams, you're robbing yourself." Great words from Rampage right there. Someone else who never lets pressure get to them is Chuck Liddell. Dubbed the Iceman, Liddell is a retired MMA fighter and former UFC light heavyweight champion. In 2009, Liddell was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. Liddell's net worth? $14 million big ones. Liddell once said, "A fighter with heart will almost always win out against a fighter with skill but no will." Wise words from Chuck. A fighter with both skill and will is the former UFC bad boy Tito Ortiz. Ortiz was a UFC crowd pleaser. Some of his fights were the most watched of all time on pay-per-view. Ortiz's net worth? $15 million. Ortiz famously said, "Prepare yourself for the worst, and the best will always happen." Someone who was clearly always prepared. You may know him as the guy with cauliflower ears, Randy Couture. A retired United States Army sergeant, Couture fought in the UFC and won 6 championship titles. Only 3 fighters have ever won titles in multiple weight classes. Randy is one of them. The other 2, Conor McGregor and BJ Penn. As of January 2023, Couture's net worth is $17 million. Now that's a lot of cheddar. Randy's quoted as saying, "The most important thing that I've figured out is that things work out the way they're supposed to. We try to have all this control and fashion things the way we want, but everything happens for a reason, and in the end, it works out the way it's supposed to." A brawler with a philosophical side. How about that? Another fighter you wouldn't want to mess with is Wanderlei Silva, a Brazilian mixed martial artist from Japan's Pride Fighting Championship and the UFC. He holds the Pride record for most wins, knockouts, and title defenses. He also has the longest win streak in Pride history. So when Silva checks his bank account, what does he see? $18 million. Silva's quoted as saying, "When I see my opponent, I begin to shake uncontrollably. Once he hits me, I think to myself, you just hit Wanderlei Silva. How dare you hit Wanderlei Silva?" And then I try to kill them. Yikes, remind me to never hit Wanderlei Silva. But you know who wouldn't be afraid to fight Silva, Fedor Emelianenko, a Russian heavyweight mixed martial artist, sambist, and judoka. Fedor currently competes in the Bellator MMA Championships. Fedor earned numerous MMA accolades over the years, including the following: 2008's Submission Beatdown of the Year, 2009's Knockout of the Year, Heavyweight of the Year, and Fighter of the Year, and Fight of the Decade in the early 2000s. Fedor's net worth, $18 million. Fedor once said, "Most importantly, you have to stay true to yourself as well as those fans who made you who you are as an athlete." Brazilian Anderson Silva knows this all too well. The former UFC middleweight champion holds the longest title streak in UFC history, with 16 consecutive wins and 10 title defenses. Dang! For his efforts in the octagon, Silva has $18 million to play with. Silva famously said, "I think you should try. Not try to be better than everyone around you, but try to be better than yourself every day." Like Silva, our next fighter was generously rewarded for his efforts as well. BJ Penn, an American professional mixed martial artist and Brazilian jiu-jitsu expert, Penn previously won both the lightweight and welterweight UFC championships. Only two other fighters in UFC history have won titles in multiple weight classes. Penn's worth $22 million smackers. Penn's sage words of advice, to paraphrase Tony Montana: "In this country, you gotta make the money first. Then when you got the money, you get the power. Then when you get the power, then you get the women." Now get ready for the top 5 richest MMA fighters on the planet. Brock Lesnar, an American professional wrestler, former professional mixed martial artist, and professional American football player. He's done it all. The former UFC heavyweight champion currently wrestles in the WWE. Lesnar's net worth, $28 million. Lesnar's best advice: "I'm a big believer in living out your dreams and facing your fears." Canadian mixed martial artist and 3-time former welterweight champion of the UFC, Georges St-Pierre, often considered to be one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time. GSP's net worth, a well-deserved $30 million. GSP once said, "For me, personally, when I'm afraid of something, when you're afraid of something, normally you try to go away, you try to avoid it. Instead of avoiding it, to overcome your fear, I believe you need to embrace it." Wise words, champ. Khabib Nurmagomedov, the 2-time Combat Sambo world champion and the reigning UFC lightweight champion, 28 wins, 0 losses, and the longest active undefeated streak in MMA history. Totally legendary. Khabib's net worth, $30 million. He's quoted as saying, "I came to the UFC to fight with top-level fighters and became the undisputed, undefeated champion. That was my goal." Speaking of legends, we have to talk about Rorion Gracie, a Brazilian-American Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Grandmaster, writer, publisher, producer, lecturer, and the co-founder of the UFC. Rorion is one of the few people in the world to hold a 9th-degree red belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he introduced Gracie Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to the world. This UFC legend is worth, get this, $50 million. Rorion also has some sage advice for us as well. In life, nothing happens to you, it happens for you. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, the richest UFC fighter of all time, Conor the Notorious McGregor. An Irish pro MMA fighter, McGregor became the most notorious fighter in MMA and became a sensation over the past couple of years. Being the bad has certainly paid off. He's worth $110 million. Most of that money came from his professional boxing debut against the one and only Floyd "Money" Mayweather. According to the Notorious, the more you seek the uncomfortable, the more you will become comfortable. Those were the richest MMA fighters in the world.